Hello, I hope you all are doing so well. Thank you so much for being here. I want to talk a little bit today about what does it mean to be a starseed. I don't know, we hear that term all the time, right? I think it's something we use when we don't want to identify ourselves as being a part of this mess. I was walking the other day and I didn't have an opportunity to do a video, but I was certainly thinking about a lot of things. And one of the things that came up was that we have to grow where we land, we have to grow where we're planted. And this idea of being a seed and trying to grow in this soil where we find ourselves. And most of us, the definition of a starseed, part of the identification of a starseed, right, is that we incarnate into some really awful places. And the question has been coming up lately, is that actually necessary? Did we have to experience as much trauma as we've experienced? Because there's this idea that, well, we incarnated into these places in order to heal and to resolve karma. And I don't know the answers to all of these things. And we don't really know until we get to the end of our journeys, right? Where we can look back in retrospect and understand and put all the pieces together in a way that makes logical sense for the human. But there is this idea that always comes up through me, which is that, you know, it may not have been my specific trauma to resolve that I actually got stuck in, you know, these traumatic experiences. But what I do know is that energy is very intangible. It is challenging to describe energy in words from a human perspective. And so hypothetically, let's just say this was our job, right? Was to come here to help humanity, to resolve the darkness and the distortion that's here. And to do that through our own experience, right? Because what we learn, we can teach. And what we reap in terms of lessons is what we can sow out into the world. And so I have always felt that in order to translate the negativity and the distortion in a way that people can understand, I have to run it through my physical body. I have to experience it firsthand in order to know what that actually is like, so that I can then properly communicate back what this experience is, how to dismantle it, how to move beyond it. So in many ways, I feel like a translator, right? But this is where we can even look out into the world and say, yeah, it's very much like what we're all trying to do, right, is to help others understand from a greater, wider humanitarian perspective, right? This inclusiveness, this, you know, we are all connected. Let's all come together. Let's all have love and compassion for everyone, for each other. But it's very, very challenging when we're also focused on our own experience and we're not allowing ourselves to try to step into the shoes of another, right? This is where I've experienced this with my daughter, with all of her mental illness, right? The anxiety, the depression, all of these things, going into her school and realizing, wow, they are not trauma informed. They don't have the first clue how to handle this level of trauma. And in many ways, unfortunately, they cannot understand, right? And so part of my job was to teach them what they didn't know. And this is true for all of us, right? This is the issue around racism. We say, well, you know, people who have not been born into a particular color of skin or a particular culture cannot understand what it's like to be oppressed from the moment of birth in that way, and to have these different experiences, right? And they walk around oblivious to that fact that these things are even going on. And it's not just true of racism, it's true of many things, right? So and these are the traumas, and this is what we're here to broadcast from our beings, right? Is the understanding of how this trauma works, but not in a way to lock people down into trauma or to create more trauma. It's to create a release from the trauma. So there's an adjustment in our energy that needs to happen too, right? Once we start to unpack our trauma, start to understand it, start to heal from it in our own being, in our own cellular way. And there are a lot of emotions that come up around that, right? Anger, rage, all of these things that we've had to suppress. But there comes a point where we have to make a huge shift and a huge transition, which is to understand, okay, that was not actually my identity. And I'm not here to perpetuate more of what I experienced. It's to shift this now, to find the wisdom of it and the wisdom within it, and to sow that wisdom. And so for me, the definition of a starseed, right, is that we come here and we're not made of this earth. We are made of something else, right? But we're born into a human body, we're born into this earth body. And a seed needs the proper soil, right, to be able to germinate and to grow. And yet a starseed is capable of landing into the most infertile type of soil and still managing to plant itself, to germinate, to grow, and to thrive, and to flourish under the most horrendous of circumstances, under any kind of circumstance. And that's the part we need to remember. Because oftentimes we get caught up in the grief of the situation, the resentment in the situation, the questioning, the wondering, the what ifs and the whys. And again, we don't often know that until way past the end of that particular experience, let's say. So we can't really know and understand as we're walking through it. But we can know that this is part of the process, this is part of the journey, is that no matter where we find ourselves, we can always reset, we can always recalibrate, and we can always replant ourselves. And this is a gift, it's an incredible gift, and yet it can be our Achilles heel also, right? We have this unending hope. And oftentimes we find ourselves in situations where we know we are capable, right, of turning over a new leaf, restarting, finding our grounding, finding our center, and resetting ourselves. And yet we may be doing that in the wrong situation, in the wrong relationship, in the wrong place, in the wrong family, in the wrong job, in the wrong community. Right? So these abilities that we have to grow, to sustain ourselves in the most infertile of places, we can also, in many ways, create our own prison because of that. So it's to recognize we're not here to suffer. Just because we can endure suffering doesn't mean we're supposed to stay there. And that doesn't mean that suffering is our mission. It is not at all. Our mission is to grow wisdom where there was no hope. Where the soil is infertile. we start dropping our seeds of wisdom to create that fertile soil, right? So where others are unaware of what is going on, we drop those light seeds. And what was infertile now becomes ripe for growth. And that's what we're doing. I'm going to leave that here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take good care.